All right, we are live. I usually wait for somebody to log in. Comments here. Oh, Clark is here. What's up, Clark? I am interstatal. Here we go. We got two watches already. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Angie's Angles. It is April the 10th in the year of my Lord, 2025. Broadcasting live from Smoke Therapy, 215 Ronkonkoma Avenue, Ronkonkoma, New York. You ever in the neighborhood, stop in. Tonight, I am blessed and lucky to have Vin Masana from Access Baseball. Vin is why don't we not tell what Vin is, and let's just go right to the thingamajig, and we can talk about Vin. Vin's a 2009 graduate of Center Reach High School, where he helped lead the Cougars to their first title in 18 years. While at Center Reach, he was named the League 3 MVP, All-County, All-Long Island, All-State. At Farmingdale State College, he played in the 2010 and 11 seasons, winning two Skyline Conference championships. He pitched 70 innings over 2 seasons and won 8 games. He's currently second in program history in Ks to 9. Vin also founded Access Baseball, which covers college, high school, and travel baseball in Long Island. And he dabbles as the Long Island scout for the San Diego Padres. Let's welcome in Vin. Let's hear it for Vin. All right, Vin, take it over. Give a little intro.
Thank you, Angie. Great to be here. Awesome setup. Big Met fan. And, you pretty much covered it all. This time of the year, I'm very busy, covering high school and college baseball in Long Island. This is right in the peak of our busy season, April and May especially. And then later on, we do coverage of the travel scene as well, just to continue to give the audience content. But obviously, our bread and butter is right now. A lot of people are, invested in how their schools are doing, how their school's doing. Parents that want to see their kids' name in writing and just help them get exposure. That's what it's all about, trying to get them to college.
Speaking about their kid's name in writing, Daniel was featured on Access Baseball write-up a couple of times during his career at Longwood High School under Coach McSherry. So, Vin, we're happy to have you in studio.
Thank you.
We're going to talk Mets. I want to pick your brain on a couple things in Major League Baseball, and we'll try to fit that in our half hour. So let me just say hello to the ones I've missed. Clark, Harold, I am duo interstatal. So my friend Eric always wants Trevor Bauer on the Mets, and he's asking you what your thoughts are on the Trevor Bauer situation. We'll touch base on that real soon. Tom, you're welcome for the pizza. It's my pleasure anytime, buddy. Harold, what's going on, pal? So let's get into the topic of my podcast, Soto's impact early season results. As we all know, Angie's Angles family knows that I was not a Soto fan to become a Met for that money. $750 million is a lot of money for 1.5 dimensional player, right?
It could escalate too if he hits all of his incentives and if he's going to opt out, they can offer him $5 extra million a year. So
that's correct.
$802 million.
Yeah, it's just insane money. And we were talking off camera earlier about the situation between Soto and Alonso, and we were both very surprised that Alonso went so deep before he was signed by anybody, right? And I put a lot of blame on Scott Boras, and you have to put the blame on Alonso for hiring Scott Boras, right? Because he was doing very well with the company before, and he chose to go the Scott Boras route because Scott Boras is
the super agent, quote unquote.
Well, I think he's related to my ex. I think he's Satan's spawn. I'm not really sure, but that's a conversation for another day. So, hey, Nick Troyan, representing Adelphi University. If you didn't know, guys, Vin's an Adelphi graduate, so a lot in common over here.
That's right, Panthers, baby.
So we were talking about Soto, and Vin was very happy that the Mets signed Soto. I don't want to say I wasn't very happy. I was happy that we got him. I was happy that we got a bona fide batter, offensive production. The guy could hit falling out of bed with his eyes closed, stand on one leg. not taking that away from him, but $750 million when I felt our pitching was lacking, our relievers were lacking. We've never had a bona fide center fielder since Beltran, and that's been a bunch of years. So I thought we should spend the money wisely in a little different areas to improve the team.
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts. So for one, I mean, I watched him since he came up, and he was an absolute menace. I mean, the stat went viral about how he had the highest OPS in any stadium in Citi Field. He had the highest OPS in out of any stadium in Citi Field. So obviously he wasn't going to be spooked by the dimensions or, you know, whatever was going on in the air when the Mets first moved into Citi Field, and nobody seemed to be able to hit a home run. And guys like Soto and, you know, Chase Utley never seemed to have a problem. So,
oh, you had to bring up Chase Utley, Ben.
Oh, I hate it. But you know what he did to us. So,
yes.
So look, I definitely see your points. The Mets were lacking in starting pitching. They don't have a bona fide center fielder, but I think they made the decision that they want to be star driven. The Dodgers are star driven, and that's when they went over the hump. You know, you can try to round out your rosters and round out your roster as best as you can and have no weak spots. But a lot of teams have tried that, and then you kind of, those guys might necessarily not be enough to get over the hump in October. I think the Dodgers proved that last year, that when you have three, you know, superstars at the top of the lineup, sometimes it's just too tough to overcome for any pitching staff, and they just wore you down. And, you know, when you combine him with Lindor, I think their vision was that they wanted to have these two superstars. And then obviously at the time, Alonso was not on the roster, so he was not in that decision. But they got Alonso back, so they're able to have the top three, which rivals any team in the league. I would say you have to defer to the Dodgers because they've done it now. But I would say the Mets are a smidgen behind that. And, you know, I know there's comments about the lack of home run production, but, you know, it is early April. The ball does not fly well. I think that when you look, you know, across baseball, generally Memorial Day is that first line of demarcation where you start to see the stats become sticky. And I would be shocked if he's not on pace for, you know, his normal career numbers once the weather turns. Because if you were sat in Citi Field any day this week, you can't tell me that, you know, you would expect to see the ball flying out of the ballpark. So I was pleased. I think that he's going to be a menace in the lineup for the next, you know, hopefully the 15 years. If he opts out, then so be it. We get the best of his prime years at 30 years old. So, yeah, and look, it's helped Alonso because if you look at when he first came up and he had 53 home runs, J.D. Davis was sitting behind him in the lineup, Daniel Vogelbach in 2022. I don't even remember 2023. That was like a
blur,
wasteland of
right.
a year. So, yeah, J.D. Martinez had an awful season for the most part last year. He was his protection in the lineup. So, and a lot of people will say that now that the guy that hitting behind you isn't necessarily as important as the guy hitting before you, because if Soto is going to get on base at a 440 clip, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to drive him in. So I think you really can't complain. Obviously, they have some deficiencies, which we could get into as well. But as far as Soto, I think the guy is a perennial MVP candidate, and I would much rather him do it for the Mets than for the Nationals or any other team.
Well, those are good points you make. Harold Atkins says HR production isn't there, home run production isn't there yet, but Alonso's already reaping the benefits hitting behind Soto. So sure, Harold, you and I have a lot of offline conversations about that. Vin, I'm going to run this by you. I hate the lineup as it stands. I hate it. I don't understand why we have Lindor, Soto, Alonso. It makes no sense. They're all capable of hitting home runs, and if Lindor leads off with a home run, and Lindor is good for the leadoff spot, I'm not going to argue that. If you're Angie's Angles fans, you know two things. I ad nauseum shouted out that Brandon Nimmo is not a leadoff hitter, nor is he a center fielder, and the Mets proved me right on both points. So maybe Mets, if you're listening, get me into the room one day, and I can give you some more insight, because you guys proved it. You moved them to left field, so much so when Tyrone Taylor played, you didn't put Nimmo in center. You put Taylor in center and left Nimmo in left, because Nimmo's not a center fielder. If you know what I mean. Right. And then Juan Soto batting second, Vin. I don't understand. Here's what I want to see. This is my dream lineup for right now. Mm-hmm. I want Lindor leading off. I want Acuna batting second. The kid's got a big bat. He's quick. You put Soto third and Alonso fourth. Soto and Alonso is going to protect Acuna. Acuna is going to see nothing but meatballs, especially if Lindor does his magic, gets on base. Acuna can hit the fastball with no problem. He's not going to see junk because they don't want to pitch to Soto with two guys on base. What's your feelings about that lineup?
Yeah, I think that they don't have an optimal lineup right now. I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't like Nimmo in certain spots of the lineup. I think if you could draw it up, you would have a guy like Nimmo hitting leadoff, where the version of him that he was earlier in his career. I don't know what he is right now. He seems to have changed his game. When he came up, he could never stay healthy, but he would get on base. He was a 390 on base guy. He routinely worked. I'm not going to say 10 pitch at bats, but he always
deep
had
counts.
Deep count. Yeah. 3-2. Now it seems like he hunts earlier in the count.
He's turned into a home run hitter.
Yeah, and he's not hitting home runs. So
right.
It's one thing if it was working. So in the offseason, I talked about it with my friends. I like the idea of having Vientos second because I thought that for the same reason you said with Acuna was that he was going to see a lot of fastballs and people weren't going to pitch around him, obviously. So maybe that was going to counteract any sophomore slump. Now, this is when going back to January. So obviously he has had the sophomore slump. So my thought was you put him there. He's going to see a lot of pitches. You put Soto third because he's the best pure hitter. And then you have Alonso clean up because he's the run producer.
Right.
So, I think that they just don't have guys that you kind of would – they don't have the players that have the skill set that you would traditionally think of each spot in the lineup. Lindor, I don't really think of him as a leadoff hitter. You
Correct.
think of him – when he came here, he was a 3 hitter, right? So they had to kind of figure out how to get him going, and it worked out. So I'm not going to say that, he deserves to be moved down in the lineup. And then also the injuries. I mean, I don't know what version of Jeff McNeil we're going to get. He's as streaky as it gets, but he was incredibly hot in the second half. He had a 900 OPS, which, that's basically what middle of the order hitters are putting up nowadays. So I think he's got a spot guaranteed in the lineup. He's probably going to be, 6, 7, or 8, one of those. And when Alvarez gets back, we'll see. Hopefully he acclimates himself back to playing, every day once he's healthy, and he could avoid some of those issues that plagued them last year, chasing those sliders away. So look, it's not the game also has changed in how they construct these lineups. I think what people fail to realize now is they're not putting Soto second because he's Paul Duca-esque. They're putting him second because the numbers say that you get 60 to 70 more plate appearances per year if you hit second than if you hit fourth or third or fourth. So they want to get your guys, the best hitters, up the most times. That's why Trout was a number 2 hitter for recently. Teams just started going.
Ohtani's leading off.
Yeah, so they want.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. So I understand. Anybody that's watched the game for longer than I have, as long as me or longer, you understand what, traditionally you look for a spot in the lineup. But there's not a lot of Ricky Hendersons in the game. So, I guess they try to get creative with how they can produce runs. So, it's frustrating for me because you see the bottom of the lineup is absolute barren wasteland right now. Nobody can get on base, let alone drive in a run. So you just hope that as it gets warmer, some of these guys can figure it out. Brett Beatty, on the other hand, I would be surprised if he was on the team much longer. I think that they gave him every opportunity, and he's failed to become the player that they envisioned. Maybe it's got to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched base on Beatty. Clark, too much analytics, not to be confused with Kevalytics. So let's make sure we understand that.
I get it. People don't love it, but at this point, it's in the game. It used to be, the thing that, guys like Sandy Alderson were looking at it and everybody else was kind of old school. It's just that's where the direction that baseball's in. I don't think you need to use stats in every argument that you have, but I do think a lot of your opinions should be formed by the stats. So that's the way I kind of look at it at this point.
I want to give a shout out to a new watcher, Raul Almanzar. Let's go Mets World Champs 2025. Raul, thank you. Welcome to Angie's Angles family. We appreciate you. So, we all know that I had a love-hate relationship with Alonso last year. I was pro Alonso all the way until the end of the season when he was spitting the bit a little bit. That was pre-playoffs. So Alonso, I've always stated that Alonso loves the Mets, wants to be a Met, wants to do the best possible job. So Lindor didn't show up until June of last year. We got Vientos late May. We had nobody hitting on the Mets except for Pete, and Pete was trying to carry the team on his back. He was the Mets, and he tried too hard chasing the sliders. My grandmother could have gotten Pete Alonso out last year, postseason. So now that we have a solidified lineup with Soto, with Lindor, Vientos, I'm going to give him another month to really pass judgment if he's going to experience a sophomore jinx. And I agree with Vin. I didn't even think about putting Vientos second. I'm all for that. That's a good idea. He will see nothing but meatballs for sure. And we all know he could hit meatballs, if you know what I mean. So,
to be fair, he's had some better at bats. I think.
Yeah.
Even,
and he walked a couple of times. Offset Lennon's in the house.
Not even getting into analytics, just pure, has he been taking good at bats? Has he been putting good swings on the ball?
Right.
The guy made a tremendous diving play on him the other day, Conine.
Yes, correct.
The one that comes to mind to end that Houston game, he hit that ball right on the nose to the shortstop. So, look, it's
right.
You can't sugarcoat it. He's got a 105 batting average, but you just got to hope that 40 at-bats is not going to make the guy's story.
Correct.
40 at-bats is not going to put you in the Hall of Fame either. So.
Correct. Harold from Harold Sanderson, Pete's not an aircraft carrier. He needs a supporting cast. I can't agree more. You're 100% right. And speaking about Harold, your Cubbies and Fuego, Senor Harold. Very good job by your Cubbies. And Clark, as soon as you get rid of Ollie Oxenfree up there in St. Louis, you're going to have a better team. And while you get rid of Ollie, please take Mendoza. Who? I can't stand Mendoza, Vin. Why are the Mets infatuated with ex-Yankees? Can't we have our own identity? Why? David Stearns thought him and Counsell were joined at the hip, but they weren't. So we had to backpedal to Carlos Mendoza. Who? I think Carlos Mendoza lost a lot of games for us last year. He's famously pulling his pitchers with 4 2/3. If they get into a little jam, and then the reliever gets them out and they win the game, and it costs the pitcher the win because he didn't go to 5, right? I think Carlos Mendoza needs to yell and scream a lot more than he does. I want an Earl Weaver type of manager for the Mets. I want somebody that's going to run out there and kick dirt on the plate a la Lou Piniella.
Well, I don't want to, pour water on your argument, but I don't think those guys exist anymore. You always hear about the collaborative process, right? Like Lou Piniella was not going to do a collaborative process with the front office. So they want guys that have the skill set that they envision. And, look, I'm not going to argue in favor of the guy, but that's just the direction that it's gone. And Counsell, it hasn't worked out. It's not like they won the NLCS last year with them.
Correct.
So, I wanted him too. That's what we all were hoping for. We wanted him. Stearns worked well with him, but I don't think the manager has much to do with the success of teams that they used to. They used to have their fingerprint on the ball club. I don't think Mendoza's making the rosters, the lineups. That's a different story. But I'm reading a book right now, actually, by Tyler Kepner on World Series, and in the early 1900s, those guys were the GMs of the team. John McGraw. I mean, they were literally in charge of shipping out players that they didn't want. That doesn't exist anymore. So I'm not even calling it new school. It's just what it is. Like guys. I'm trying to think of name offhand. Kevin Cash is probably the most extreme, but the Rays are a different animal. They try to zig while others zag. As far as the Mets go, with the pitching is a problem. I'm not gonna say otherwise. These guys need to be able to go deeper into games. We were fortunate that Manaea turned it around last year, and he was able to consistently go 7 innings. Peterson was going 6 innings every start. But yeah, they need to give more depth. And me as a former pitcher, I took a lot of pride into going deep into games, getting wins. I know that they've devalued that. They look at relievers now as kind of like keeping the peace as opposed to being firemen. Where when I played, if a starter was losing it, you brought in a reliever to kind of bail you out. Now it's like, well, the matchup dictates that you're going to bring in a guy that, throws sliders, heavy sliders versus a player that can't handle it. Where, it's just the whole landscape has changed, and they're not asking as much of the starting pitchers, which I think it will come back around personally, because the guys make so much money. Are you going to ask a $40 million per year pitcher to get 15 outs per game? No, you're going to want them to go longer, or you're not going to pay them as much. So something has to give. As far as that question, a six inning start a complete game, I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think maybe they'll waive the 5-inning requirement, because no one's going to win 200 games, let alone 300 games. Once Verlander, Kershaw, and Scherzer retire, and Garrett Cole, those are the last guys that you can even count on that were, going consistently deep into the game. So that's how I feel about that. I wish guys took more pride in going deep into the games. I don't know if there's an easy answer for that, but it's not pleasing as somebody that pitched in college to see guys, get taken out before they even qualify for a win.
So let me ask you a question. We got a couple of minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the rules at Major League Baseball? What do you think of the pitch clock? And you might know my answer, but I want to hear yours.
I think it's gotten to the point now where it's not really that noticeable. I don't like that they put a clock on it, because I think that it strategically changed the game, and I think that it kind of fundamentally changed the game. So I was not in favor of it. However, I think the players have adjusted now to the point where, I was watching a game last night. Bassett got called for a pitch clock violation against the Red Sox. No, against the Mets, I think it was his last outing. So
correct.
It happens occasionally. It hasn't impacted the game the way I was afraid that it was going to. The 2-step off rule, that's dumb, because you're changing the fundamentals of the game. If a guy picks off twice, now you can take a 20-foot lead. So that and the 3-batter rule, because when they enacted that, I think games are 3.5 hours. They wanted to do something to curtail those, games that were going past midnight, 8 o'clock start or whatever, 7 o'clock start going 11. It hasn't happened. There's no more 3.5 hour games. So get rid of the rule.
So far, Vin could stay because I agree with him. What about the ghost runner, Vin?
Yeah, that's dumb too.
Okay.
I thought it was a COVID thing. They wanted to get the games over with quicker. The games are 2.5 hours. You don't need to do that.
So let me ask you this question. Last season, we had the ghost runner all the way up until whatever, October the 3rd, 4th, whatever. And then the ghost runner disappeared in the playoffs. You can't have from column A and take from column B if you don't have it to take. You can't have the ghost runner all season long. Then the playoffs are like, all right, no more ghost runners. I don't understand. Are we playing softball? Are we playing baseball? That's my argument. Rob Manfred, God forbid anything ever happens to him, the feds are coming to knock on my door, because everybody knows what I think about Rob Manfred. And the bigger bases too, and the catcher sliding lane or the runner sliding lane. Come on, enough is enough.
Yeah, they made too many changes.
Why don't we just play tiddlywinks? For God's sakes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything before we go into the press circle, but this would be the time if you want to bring up any questions that you might have for our audience or anything.
The DH, that was a big deal when they made that
to the National League. Yes.
Yeah, because I think that there was one of the few differences between the leagues, right? Like, I know that before my time, there was significant differences just in the style of play. You looked at teams in the National League were more small ball, and then the American League, you mentioned Earl Weaver, his style of play was kind of wait for the 3-run home run.
Right.
And then the umpires were even different.
Correct.
Know, so now you took out the one difference between the two. Look, I don't know. I think at this point, people probably are in favor of it because it helps maybe stimulate offense, whereas it was, it's one of the things that they could have done, one of the few buttons they could have pressed to get more offense. So and it helps jobs. I guess it gives another job per team. But yeah.
But baseball's such a chess game, Vin, right? That you and I agree on. You'll never have a Dennis Eckersley, Kirk Gibson at bat ever again in Major League Baseball with the pitch clock, with this thing. That was like a 3-minute at bat, and you were on the edge of your seat. You talked about it at the water cooler the next day. I mean, you're never going to have that happen ever again. The white knuckle tension, Eckersley calling off pitch after pitch, Gibson stepping out, adjusting, limping on his leg. That's never going to happen because you got to get in the batter's box. God's sakes.
Yeah. Well, I see your point there. There's a lot of cinema in the game of baseball.
Right.
Gary Cohen said in an interview the other day, a lot of what makes great baseball great is not the action; it's the tension leading up to the action. So, yeah,
it's a great comment.
I completely understand, why people don't like change, but unfortunately, it's not our decision. So they're not worried about losing me as a fan, because I'm going to be there regardless. They're always talking about getting that younger audience. So whatever in their internal system that's saying that what to do, I guess that's what's spurring their rule changes. But I'm not going to argue in favor of Rob Manfred.
So I want to thank Vin again. Thank you very much, Vin, for coming in studio. We appreciate you. Guys, I hope you found this entertaining. I'm going to try to bring more guests into the studio or have them remote to add to Angie's Angles aura. All right. Tonight's prayer circle goes as follows. Harold, we pray for your wife and your coworker and your friend Ed. Scott Tobias, we're praying for your wife and your mom. Linda Stein, we pray for your dad and yourself. Mark Brooks, my brother from another, we're praying that your house gets reconstructed in record time. Kevin Elliott, we are sending prayers for your health challenges down in Florida. The Krause family, we're praying for Aubrey and Darcy and the rest of your clan. Clark, brother-in-law Brad, and a special happy birthday to your sister Trisha. Happy birthday, Trish. Deb and Lee, we're praying for Lee down there in Maryland. Marianne Bello, we're praying for your mom out in Las Vegas. Larry Levy, we're praying for Frida, your wife, as she stays in remission with cancer. Mr. McGowan, sir, we got your back. We got you, my friend. Big John, we're praying for your cousin Richie, Phil's Nona, and Big John's brother Angelo's friend Dave. Tom, we're praying for Paul and Janet, and your good friend Mary's sister Carol, who passed away. Joe, we're praying for Wayne with ALS. John, we're praying for John Kane. And Johnny Barbecue, special prayers to your daughter Caitlin Morrow on her upcoming surgery. This has been Angie's Angles coming to you live from Smoke Therapy, 215 Ronkonkoma Avenue, Ronkonkoma, New York. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop on by. Good night. God bless. I love you.